Hi, detectors. Thank you for joining us today. Fascinating second hour. If you've missed any of it, go to our archives at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or DeadlineLive.info. Liam Scheff has been kind enough to join us today, and hopefully he'll be back again and again and again. You spell Scheff, S-C-H-E-F-F. Liam, L-I-A-M. LiamScheff.com with us today. And we brought you on, Liam, to kind of give people a taste of your research on AIDS, because it's like nothing I've really ever heard before by anybody. You really nail it. It makes a lot of sense to me. So, Liam Scheff, the conspiracy realist, let me just have you roll on that.
Let's roll. Let's catapult the propaganda. We got to catapult the propaganda. That was a great drop. All right, it goes like this. Ready? I'm not going to talk to you about things that were created in a virus lab. I got to tell you something. Researchers aren't that smart. You can't make something that strategically hurts some gay people under some circumstances, but not those who are out of the closet and not those who aren't doing a ton of drugs. You can't do something that then hurts every heterosexual African in sub-Saharan Africa, specifically only, but no heterosexuals. What you have to do, and what the AIDS team have done, was they've taken the previously existing groups of hated people, the black Africans that we call black, they're not, they're brown skinned like most of us, and the hated populations in the United States, drug addicts, gay population, and they've put a label on them, and they painted them with a big red ribbon. And now liberals think that in order to help these people, you have to circumcise the black man in Africa and put drugs inside of the sexual organs of the women in Africa. They call them microbicides, and they get very excited, and they talk about them on NPR. Oh, they're very excited about the microbicides. What they don't talk about is the filthy water, the lack of food, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of sewage in 70, 80, 90% of a lot of these places. They don't talk about the civil wars. They don't talk about Idi Amin. They don't talk about other MI5, 6 and CIA operations that, run through Africa to this day.
We have Coney now, yeah.
Yeah, the history of the legacy of King Leopold of Belgium and the Congo. They don't talk about the actual history. They don't talk about the history in the United States of what happened in the gay community. So let's lay it down. HIV tests don't work. HIV tests come up positive for everything. They come up positive for everything. That's why the Abbott Laboratories test says, under limitations of the test, which their lawyers make them write, so when they get sued, they have an out in court, it says, and I quote, "At present, there is no recognized standard for determining the presence or absence of antibodies to HIV in human blood." One more time. At present, that is 1984 to 2012, there is no recognized standard for determining the absence or presence of HIV in human blood. What does that mean? It means this is not an HIV test. That is the standard HIV test. You look in the medical literature, and you'll find out that it will come up positive for pregnancy, transfusion, transplantation, alcoholic liver disease, that is drinking. My favorite, bovine exposure. Uh-oh. Have you ever been flashed by a cow? No, but you've probably had cow's milk somewhere. Bovine exposure. Uh-oh, we report that women who've milked cows can test positive for reasons other than being infected with anything.
That's so raw milk again is what it is.
It's the raw milk. Yeah, exactly. If you've ever had raw milk, do not take an HIV test. If you've ever been pregnant, do not take an HIV test. If you've ever been a child of someone who is pregnant, do not take an HIV test, because they come up positive for every reason and no standardized reason. Yes, they have 3 iterations of tests. They're the same proteins arranged 3 different ways. That's all it is. So it's sort of a crucible. They put you through one test and you genuflect and say, oh, I feel terrible. I had sex with somebody I shouldn't have had sex with. Now let me ask you out there, you grown-ups, a question. When you have an STD, usually, and I'll just tell my own story, when I've had a little bit of something from a girl, maybe a yeast infection or something that maybe I wish I hadn't have had, I wake up and I go, whoa, oh no, uh-oh, I know where I was last night. HIV infection is the only thing that people have to tell you that you have 20 years later. Oh, 20 years ago you had an STD. I did? I had an STD? Yeah, you did. You don't remember. You had no sores. Nothing appeared on your genitals, but trust us. You had an STD. Please. That's not the way STDs work. That's not what happens. what happened was Richard Nixon in 1970 started a war on cancer. He wanted to prove that cancer was caused by something and that could be fixed by something, and he wanted to deflect from his crumbling regime. It wasn't working out for him, and the CIA guys wanted him out anyway, and they got him out. There were some guys, Robert Gallo, National Cancer Institute, Peter Duesberg, Luc Montagnier in Paris at the Institut Pasteur, and they decided they didn't even have to look for viruses. They decided to look for an enzyme. That enzyme is called reverse transcriptase. You don't have to remember all this. It's not on the test. But just remember, they weren't even looking for viruses. They just looked for an enzyme. They said that enzyme would stand in for a virus. They were wrong. That enzyme appears everywhere. You can't say that it stands in for anything. It just appears everywhere. It's a very common enzyme. Robert Gallo says in 1976, I found a virus that causes cancer. He's accused by his fellow researchers of having committed a fraud. He mixed together samples from 3 monkeys. He runs away in shame. Because he was accused of fraud and mixed together samples from 3 monkeys, you can be sure he'll never mix together anything from anybody again, right? No. In 1981, he says, I found a virus that causes cancer. I now have to find a population with a cancer to use this virus. Not a virus, just these stupid enzymes and proteins. He goes and finds this population outside of Japan, near Nagasaki, in Japan, near Nagasaki. Remember Nagasaki, nuclear bomb? They have a slightly elevated rate of leukemia. He says, this must be caused by the virus that I didn't find. He says, the virus is sexually transmitted. It was traveled through the slave trade, and it comes from monkeys. Sound familiar? That's
it
the
does explain his malfeasance, certainly.
That's already the HIV model there in 1981. Out of all of the people who test positive for the proteins he says stand in for his virus, 0.06% have cancer. So this today is considered proof that a virus causes cancer. Negative 99.94% correlation. In other words, this is the virus that causes cancer except 99.99% of the time, which is very common in these fields. Nevertheless, this is the reason there's an HPV, because HTLV1, which is what this was caused cancer, but it didn't. The gay population comes out after Stonewall. They're riddled with, they're free as can be. They're young men, remember. So men, we have to be very honest. This is a little visceral, but men are different than women in that men will think about sex every 6 seconds. Women generally provide kind of a bulwark or a resistance against having sex every 6 seconds. You don't even know my name. You don't remember. Oh, it's our 5-day anniversary. Take me out for dinner. I have to tell you, young men who are horny, who are into men, don't have to go through that. So the bathhouses explode in New York. There is wild, libidinous, rampant sex with 10 guys in a room, 20 guys in a room. People are drilling holes in shower doors, in bathroom stalls. It is men who invented the glory hole. You don't have to know who's on the other side. You're just interested in the act. It can be 30 seconds and you're done. In order to keep this up, a lot of drugs come into the mix. Larry Kramer, the playwright, AIDS gay activist, listed some 57 drugs that were used on any given weekend in New York on Fire Island. 57 or more drugs.
Crosby's parties as well, as we've heard recently.
Okay. Who's?
Bing Crosby.
Oh, boom. Well, it was, but then they weren't having. What was happening in the gay community, and this is pointed out by another researcher called Tony Lance, was in the shower, in the bathhouses, they began to use, again, a little visceral, they began to use a long sort of 6, 8, 10-inch attachment to shower heads, and they would put that in rectally, and they would wash out their colons with municipal tap water at high pressure. Now, scientists today will tell you that 80% of your immune system lives in your gut. Now, you're taking drugs all the time. You're taking antibiotics all the time. Tetracycline is being handed out in the bathhouses because you have so many STDs. You're just taking antibiotics prophylactically. You destroy your functional immune system. It is now known by the mainstream that you signal white blood cells, T cells. You signal T cells from inside of your gut. If you don't have a gut lining, and you don't have a gut lining, by the way, if you take antibiotics for 4 years, or even you don't have a gut lining if you take them for 4 weeks. And these guys begin to get sick.
Well, hold on. Speaking of showers, I'm going to have to take one after the show, but we have 1 minute left. So give us a summary, because people do get sick somehow, and they're, of course,
well, I'm telling you how. Yeah.
vaccinations.
No, I get you. I'll tell you how the people get sick. I'm telling you now, in the 70s, it was massive drugs. They destroyed their immune systems. They had paper-thin guts, and they had chronic immune systems. The CDC dropped a drug called AZT into the mix, which was a cancer chemotherapy bone marrow-suppressing drug, and the death rate went from about 12,000 to 45,000 people per year after AZT. And where did it go? They pulled AZT. It went back down. So the medical system is very, very responsible, and the gay community to some degree complicit in all of these deaths. In Africa, they took the brand name AIDS and they put it on people who were starving to death, who had fever, weight loss, itching, and diarrhea. That was AIDS in Africa, and it has remained that way for 20 years.
And Bill Gates is coming to save them.
With vaccines, but look for a clean water program. I mean, look for a rehabilitation of an infrastructure program. You just don't see it.
You got a new book coming out. Quickly tell us what that is, and we have about 30 seconds, if that.
The book will be out in June. I'm not going to give the title because I don't want the bad guys to copyright it. And, so the book is essentially a conspiracy theory book for dummies. Like, you know what I'm saying? Conspiracy theory.
There you go.
For the average.
Also on the Robert Scott Bell Show, I believe that's on the GNC network. Catch him at liamscheff.com. It's linked at deadlinelive.info. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Big expose on the 9/11 truth movement coming. I'm Jack Blood telling you to stay bold, and mighty forces will come to your aid.